Hi, everybody. Welcome tonight to the Masters in Public Administration online at USC, a session on critical topics. And this time I'm super happy to be joined tonight by candidates and elected officials from among our very esteemed MPA alumni here at USC. So we'll turn the page a little bit and go over the agenda for tonight. I would like each of our alumni to do a quick introduction. I want to talk a little bit about why elections actually matter, who wins a victory, and how they comport themselves, and how they bring their policy ideas, the work that they do in their community, and their dedication really is the critical piece of an election. So I know many of you have decisions to make coming up next week, but I wanted to hear from the kind of people who use their education every day to make a difference in their communities and how they got to elective office, why they think it's important to serve the public in that way, and any tips they might have for those of you who are interested in running for public office. So I'll introduce each of our four expert alumni, ask a quick question or two about best practices for getting involved, and move through tonight. So thanks for coming. Let me just introduce our four quickly by name. Tonight we have Luke Evelyn with us, who is a council member for the County of Kauai in Hawaii. Aloha, Luke. Good to see you again.
Aloha.
Josh Hoover is joining us. He is a chief of staff of the California State Legislature and an elected school board member for the Folsom Unified School District. I think you're the only one here tonight, Josh, who's not actually in the middle of your own reelection campaign and out working for other people's campaigns. Appreciate your time tonight. Virginia Chang Karali, who joins us from the peninsula south of San Francisco in California, is actually running for two different offices that she currently holds and running for re-election to both the Fire District and as commissioner of the Harbor District Board in her area around Menlo Park, California. And finally, Jeremy Martinez, so pleased to see him again. He is CEO of United Way, but currently a candidate for the 5th district of the Merced City Council. Good luck in your first election next Tuesday, Jeremy. So without further ado, I think we'll just go through a couple quick questions about the landscape for working with your MPA and an elected official. Any comments you might have about how the larger election forces are impacting your local community in elections, how you believe that your policy strategy is advanced by holding elective office or elections, and then what should we know about our decision makers? So Luke, I'm going to start with you tonight and ask you to introduce yourself, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about, from the other side, what should we know, about working with you or anyone who holds a high office that we want to come work with. So Luke's bio is here on the slide deck, and I'll turn the presentation over to Luke.
Thank you, Dr. Dora. A little bit about me. I am finishing off my first term on the Kauai County Council. I'm a lifelong resident of the island of Kauai. In my senior year at college, I started a outrigger canoe manufacturing company with my two closest friends from high school, actually. I did that for 3 years, living on the island of Oahu, actually, doing that. And then I was run over by a motorboat, which broke my back and severed my pelvis and my gluteals, and took me back to Kauai and out of day-to-day operations in my canoe company. And through that experience, I don't know if this is typical in a near-death experience, but I had a sort of a deep understanding of my own fragility in a way, and wanted to build resilience in my own life. And one of the ways that I did that kind of crazily was I built this off-grid home on Kauai with my wife, which we lived in for 7 years. And as we were doing that and living off the grid, I realized I wanted to build resilience for myself. And in doing so, I sort of pulled up this drawbridge on my community. And in a lot of ways, which I don't want to get into right now, but I realized that I was not really helping the situation at all, and that I wasn't working with my community. I wasn't seeing other people in my own little off-grid system. I literally was taking energy from the sun and just using it for myself without sharing it with my neighbors. And had this sort of almost like midlife crisis at the age of 27, thinking, what am I doing? And then sort of started going the other way and just getting more and more involved in community work. which was, some nonprofit work. And then ultimately I served on our Citizens Advisory Committee for the General Plan update on Kauai, which was my first real policy experience. And it was through that process of learning about land use policy and housing policy, which was sort of the first time that I began to understand the importance of public policy, both in solving problems and unintentionally sometimes in helping create problems. And I just became really passionate about land use policy. And then through that process, actually, one of the land use planners at the County of Kauai suggested that I go back to school. So I started looking into MPA programs, and then actually decided not to do it. And then the morning after the 2016 election, I woke up in the morning and thought, okay, I gotta try and be part of the solution here. So I ended up applying actually that day after the election in 2016 for USC's program. And then I still remember in my intro to policy classes, I still didn't think I wanted to do elected office. I thought I would maybe be a planner or something. And I remember doing all these sort of self-reflection things. And I wish I could go back and read all of those, because I think ended up sort of convincing myself to run for public office through that process in my early intro to policy classes with Dr. Rawlings, actually. And then ran for office in 2018, and fortunately I got on my first attempt at running, and here I am running again. So to get to some of those framing questions, as far as how does the MPA help support me in office? One of the things which was nice was when I was in the program, it always felt like politics was this sort of, this crazy thing I did during the day. And then I go down and sit down at night, and it was like taking a deep breath and like getting to this relaxing space and just focusing on policy without the rest of the politics was like it was like a meditation almost for me to spend 3 hours every night doing policy work, which just felt so sort of pure and good. And then I wake up in the morning and I go back into, doing my day-to-day politics work, which never quite feels all that pure or good. And I think from a bigger perspective, the MPA helps me often. It's not only in policy development, but in helping communicate policy and giving me the confidence to communicate policy. And I've sort of become known as the policy wonk on council, because I'm just the person who's always talking about policy. And I don't think I would have had that confidence to speak about it in that way without the MPA. As far as the framing question around how does, the national election impact my little local election here, it's a nonpartisan race, so I won't get into the partisan aspects of it. But one of the things is it's made it, in a lot of ways, feels like the bar for elected office almost has been set pretty low. And I think what people really want is just somebody to be kind and competent, and it goes a long way. So a lot of my own, running for office again is just to be kind and competent, which I think is, hopefully easy for most of us to do here. And, Dr. Dora, what were some of the other framing questions there?
How do we get to know our decision makers, or what should we know about a decision maker to know how to approach somebody if we wanted to make change on a school board or a county council or city council? Yeah,
I always, it's for the most part, we're desperate for people, or I am to call me and engage in policy. Often we'll have some controversial policy, some mass mailer will go out somewhere and everybody says submit testimony against this, and we'll just get a million emails, opposing something with some, copy and pasted email. But people aren't really engaging in policy. So for me, every so often I get a call or an email for somebody saying explain this. And for me, it's yes, I'm super excited to sit down and walk somebody through a policy, which are often nuanced and complicated. And for all elected officials, our contact information is out there. And I do think at the end of the day, what every elected official wants is to get reelected. And they do that by working with people. So I think for the most part, people will be surprised at how willing their elected officials or their staff are at really working with them to try and help solve their problems. And so for me, that's if somebody comes to me with a problem and says, here's this issue, can you help me solve it? But my favorite thing in the world is to like sit down and like a puzzle, try and figure out how can we solve this, either, through policy action at a county level or helping direct them to the people at a state level who can help solve it. So.
That's super. Thanks, Luke. I have one question for you. I've always been charmed by a campaign behavior that they exhibit in Hawaii that I have not seen done elsewhere, which is holding up signs on the roadside. Is that right? Is that something you engage in?
Yes, and at the time of COVID, it's basically all I engage in. I've had this year running for re-election. I haven't gone door to door, had any group meetings or any in-person, basically anything. And so it's really just waving on the side of the street. So normally, during a typical election, you try and get as big of a group as possible to come and wave with you. So we would do like weekly group wavings with like up to 40 people. But now it's just me on the side of the street, and it's totally mortifying to do it. But it's like, it's a tradition here. And if you don't run for office, then people are going to think, oh, this guy thinks he's, better than that, and he can't go wave on the side of the street. So you just got to suck it up and do it.
I think it's utterly charming.
So I have to say, with post-COVID, I've been wearing a mask when I do it, which just makes it actually pretty easy because I don't got to smile for 2 hours straight. So often you're like, why are you wearing a mask? And one, we have to wear a mask by law here, but two, then I can sort of scowl as I show shock and wave at people.
I know you're not, but that's great. Thank you so much. Josh, you join us from the city of Folsom and the Folsom Unified School District. Tell us about your journey to elective office and your career, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dr. Dora. My path to elective office. Well, I graduated from UCLA. I know this is a USC promotion, but I have to start with the undergrad. I am wearing the USC shirt tonight, though. So, and I ended up interning out of my undergrad program. I interned in the state capitol here in California, in Sacramento, for a couple of different, for a state senator at the time, and was able to get a job in the legislature there, and kind of just moved up the ladder in the legislature for a few years. And then I decided that I wanted to return to school, and that's when I enrolled in USC in the MPA program, and was very thankful to get accepted and had a great experience for those 2 years in the MPA program. And when I left, one of my motivations for doing the MPA is I wanted to better understand local government, local finance, different, aspects of managing, a public administration management. And I learned a lot at USC. I was able to leave that program I think I graduated in 2015, if I'm remembering my years correctly at this point. And I spent a lot of time in my community here in Folsom, building relationships and networks, and working with community and volunteering and doing a lot of different things, and decided to run for school board in the Folsom Cordova Unified School District in it was 2018 that I ran, and I was very thankful to have a very successful campaign. I was the top vote getter out of 4 people for 3 seats in that election, and became, I think, the youngest person to ever get elected to the school board here. And so that was very humbling and exciting. And it's been definitely, I think, a lot of us on this panel tonight, we never really planned for COVID and these things that we're facing now, the challenges we're facing now, but it's certainly been an incredible learning experience. Just personally, my background, I work in the state legislature still. Professionally, I also am a parent, which was a big part of my platform for school board. I have 3 kids. My wife and I have 3 kids, 11, 8, and 6. And right now it's become a very personal role for me on the school board, because my kids are struggling, to manage distance learning, to manage a lot of the challenges we're facing. And I feel that on a daily basis as a parent, especially the only parent on our board with elementary school children, which is another level of kind of challenge, I think, especially for working families. And so that's a perspective I've really tried to bring this year in this time of COVID to the school board, is just being that voice for working families. My wife and I both work, and we're both trying to educate our children as well right now, and all those families that are dealing with those scenarios. In terms of the framing questions, well, first of all, I would say that the MPA in particular has been extremely helpful, especially understanding local budgets and even school district budgets, or I'm sure for our city council members, I mean, just understanding local finance was a really important part of the MPA that I gleaned, that I've found extremely useful, in addition to a number of the other classes in the program that really helped me get a better understanding of how it actually works, because it allows me to go into these meetings and these board meetings and with a lot more understanding of the process. So definitely highly recommend the program. In terms of the framing questions, I mean, I'm thankfully not running for election this year. I don't really envy anyone that is. I think this is probably one of the most challenging years to run for election probably ever. So, I mean, not only do you have, a pretty polarized national ballot, but you also have COVID-19, which is created, as Luke kind of alluded to, a lot of challenges with campaigning. You're usually very interactive with people, and you can't do that in the same way. So I definitely think this is a one-of-a-kind election, I hope. And how do elections shape the landscape of MPA work? The MPA program is obviously not a political program, but elections have a lot to do with the work that gets done locally and at the state level and nationwide. And so you really have to kind of combine those aspects. I think the MPA gives you a really great baseline for understanding how things work. And then you bring the politics in it, and it's kind of a different animal. And larger campaigns, how do they impact local elections? I think the local elections, the school board is a nonpartisan race for us. I think a lot of school board seats are, as well as city council seats. And so I wouldn't say the national election is having the same impact on local races as it is on state partisan races, for example. I think it's going to have a larger impact there. But at the local level, one of the things I always tell people, because people ask me a lot, like, I want to make a difference, like, what do I do? Or I want to run for office. And I feel like local elections get kind of ignored. Like, nobody knows who their school board is until they start making decisions that actually impact them. And so during COVID, we've seen so much come out where it's like, oh my gosh, these decisions that people are making to close schools, to reopen schools, whatever it might be, these seats actually matter. These decision makers are people that we need to know about, and we need to be engaged and know who we're voting for. And so I think local elections are extremely important. I'm a big local government guy myself. So as much as what's going on at the national level is important, I just feel like the decisions we make in our local communities are that much more important in a lot of times, and that much closer to our community. So I think that they're very important, and I'm excited to be a part of now coming through USC and coming back to my community and actually being able to make a difference in that way. It's been really, really great. I think I'll stop there, Dr. Doerr, unless you have any other questions at this point.
So Josh, I think you made a super important point about, particularly in our schools, because that just seems to be a policy that, we grapple with all over the country. But so not only have you made the point that the local officials are important, but how would someone get access to a local official like you? What do we need to know about figuring out where our school board people are and how to communicate to them if they have questions about their children or what's happening in schools?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I ran on personally was being very accessible. And so you can get access to me in a lot of different ways, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or email. My cell phone is, don't tell anyone, but it's on no, I'm kidding. It's on our district website, right? So I would say, go to your school district's website, and they should have a board member page where you can at the very least, email your board members and let them know how you feel. I would say, though, it varies depending on the board member, how accessible people are. It's kind of up to the elected official to make themselves available. I really try to respond to all my emails and take all the calls and I'll even text with people, but that's not always the case for every elected official. So I think, but definitely making your voice heard in that way is important. And then you can also go to board meetings and make your voice heard as well. So.
Great suggestions. Thanks, Josh. We're so glad to see you back. Thanks for coming tonight. And Virginia, you have a long history of community service and volunteerism that I won't even begin to tackle, a background in economic development, and two districts that you helped to direct policy on, both of which have been critical in California, Fire and Harbor this year. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing for your re-elections.
Oh, so thanks, Dr. Dora, for inviting me to join y'all tonight. I don't know if you can see my screen, but I think, Josh, the other school that probably USC dislikes or frowns upon more than UCLA is the University of Texas at Austin after that Rose Bowl game. So that was my undergraduate degree with a minor in economics. And of course, I got my MPA at USC, which was one of the best experiences I've had. And I feel very lucky to have gone through the program. My background, as Dr. Dora said, is economic development, but primarily in finance. I have a Wall Street background, and I've worked on at different financial institutions, starting off in financial research, both in fixed income at Drexel and then in equities research at Bape and Eichler. And then I started my career basically in sales and trading when stock options or stock compensation plans started, which was a very, very long time ago when technology companies really couldn't pay their employees in cash and ended up giving them stock, which, seemed is the foundation for a lot of how companies compensate their employees in the technology area. But with that financial background, one of the biggest issues that I kind of saw coming along with, some other people in my area, the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley primarily, was this looming pension problem with government, in public employees, and people wanted to try to kind of wrap their arms around it. And at that time, and this was probably back in 2001, 2000, like the early 2000s, it was a very difficult thing to even comprehend. But so that was something that I cared a lot about. And as time went on, it became a more important issue. But the thing that really got me involved with politics was actually my time on the civil grand jury in 2007, 2008, and 2009. And California has a civil grand jury system that basically is a watchdog organization made up of citizens within a certain county. It's a very unique system and one of the only ones like it in the country. And basically, you get to research and investigate any local public agency and, local elected officials, everything up to the state. So it's from county on down and any kind of, organization, city council, special districts, school boards. I mean, it's just fascinating thing. And that's how I got to become familiar with what, happened in San Mateo County, even though I'd been involved with a lot of nonprofit work in my community, in my school district as well. So once that happened, an opportunity came up. Once I finished my grand jury work, an opportunity came up for me to run for the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board in 2011, where the biggest issue was not having a contract with our firefighters at that point for, I think, like 6 or 7 years, which was a huge, huge deal. We were at an impasse. And for special districts, firefighters can't go on strike in California. So they were working without a contract along with the board and the administrative staff. And it was a huge problem because they were, kind of like, wow, how does this affect us? And, the public was like, oh gosh, pensions and the pay. And I mean, the whole big issue. There was Menlo Park as a city, actually in 2010, was the first city to have a pension reform initiative for non-safety employees. And so this whole situation with the fire board became a bigger issue. But they knew, the firefighters knew that it had to be resolved, and so did the administration and the board. But the impasse was really bad. So I got on as a known pension reformer. I started campaigning, and the firefighters and the Labor Council, they both endorsed me, as well as the pension reform people who actually started the campaign in Menlo Park to put the pension reform initiative on there, on the ballot in 2010. So it seemed like I was the one candidate they relied on, everyone relied on, to kind of help at least steer the board into a direction that would try to get the firefighters out of an impasse with the fire district. So we did that. It took probably 4 years. When I was elected, though, in 2011, I think I was the second woman ever since 1915 to be elected to the fire board. So I think that was an appealing thing as well to the electorate and to the firefighters, because I think they kind of felt that my energy was probably more collaborative, if you will. And in 2015, when I was elected to be president, we actually did resolve the two PERB charges. I mean, just a lot of legal pension issues and employment issues. So that now we're on good footing. But around that time, the San Mateo County Harbor District Board was going through some problems, and there was a grand jury report in 2014. And because of my experience, having been on the grand jury for 2 years, 7 years before, people were like, "Oh gosh, Virginia, what are you going to do? How are you going to help with this dysfunctional harbor district?" I'm like, "Well, why are you calling me about this? It's 7 years after the grand jury that I was on." But in any case, there were so many other issues around that particular harbor district that there was someone who came off of the district board, and I got appointed. And I mean, in this particular harbor district has a very limited sphere of influence on the coast side, just north of Half Moon Bay and El Granado for Pillar Point Harbor, and also, just as importantly, South San Francisco at Oyster Point, which is South San Francisco is probably well, they like to call themselves the birthplace of the biotech industry. And so that particular marina was important for economic development. And my background, having been on the California Commission for Economic Development when Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger appointed me to that commission, played into this harbor district situation, because I also was the Biotech Advisory Committee chair. So everyone felt that since I was on a fire board and a special district board, and with my financial background and the work that I had done, that, I was a good fit. So I was appointed to that and became I think the only person at that point in San Mateo County, and I still am the only person on 2 elected boards with completely different spheres of influence, which is important for special districts. But what I saw, and this is how that kind of inspired me to pursue an MPA, what I saw was just this lack of clear communication between the elected bodies and the chief public administrator. And I kind of felt like, wow, maybe I should try to put myself in their shoes. I mean, especially for the harbor board, the general manager position was like a revolving door. And so I decided to pursue my MPA, and USC has one of the best programs in the country and probably in the world as well. But I couldn't leave to go to LA, obviously, because I was on 2 boards at that point. So the online MPA program was so compelling, and it felt like it was a great fit, and it was a good time for me to do this, that I applied. And actually in the middle of these fires up in Mendocino County, where we were, the state was just, and going crazy because deployments were happening. And so it's not even that was important, except that all of the public policy that goes around, that swirls around emergency services and disaster relief, or funding for disasters, is playing out right now. But anyway, I found out that I was accepted into the program when I was deployed by the Red Cross. I was on the board at that time, or the Silicon Valley chapter, to the Mendocino Complex Fire. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's exciting, and then it was like a tonic to me, Dr. Dora. I told Dr. Wheeler that it was like therapy, because my two boards were so heavy in terms of politics that like Luke, it was just kind of nice to be able to write about what you saw and how you think that things could be better. And, whether or not people agree with me, it was like therapeutic to me. Right. But it was a tonic. It also made me realize how important it was to communicate clearly to the chief public administrator, because the boards really have oversight over that one employee. And if you want to give direction and really have your public policy implemented, it was very clear to me that direction had to be clearly given. So that was a huge reason that I wanted to apply to the program, and the online program was a perfect fit. So, and I don't know, Dr. Dora, how this plays out. I'm kind of in agreement with Josh, in terms of the national election. I'm in the middle of two campaigns right now, as Dr. Dora said. And, everyone is just so consumed by the national election here. And I have to tell people, well, yeah, that's great, except that the local elections affect your everyday lives. And we saw that play out at the end of our capstone. Luke and I were on the same capstone team. And literally it was the Sunday before the last Tuesday, the last day of school. I think before, like August 11th was the last day of school or something, somewhere around there. But it was that Sunday when the lightning strike happened, and Monday was the CZU fire. And then Tuesday, school ended. And we had to deal with all of that. And then, we had evacuations. My fire district was deploying people into areas that CAL FIRE wasn't going into. And, at that point, you have to just count on the professionals to be able to do their job. And, we just had we as a board were really responsible in terms of making sure that we could get funding out and to deploy the resources that our firefighters needed. The Menlo Park Fire Protection District is the lead agency for one of the 8 California FEMA task forces. So, we had to make sure we were dealing with that in a thoughtful and considered way from a financial standpoint. But then the Harbor District.
Virginia.
Oh, sorry, Doc. Yeah, I didn't.
I'm going to leave space for Jeremy. So
Okay.
So same question I've asked Luke and Josh. If somebody wanted to get behind the curtain to see the kind of policy changes that are being made at a board level, how do they reach you? How do they figure out how to get to their local fire district board or mosquito abatement or whatever the special district is?
Well, so there are those public resources like the public websites, but honestly, a lot of the inquiries for me come in through Facebook too, through my personal Facebook site or my public Facebook site or Instagram. People will just message me sometimes out of the blue, or they'll contact me through one of my nonprofit boards or through the fire board, fire district website or the Harbor District website. But also, we've had these Zoom meetings, which I think has increased participation. And so, the notices have gone out, and people know that they can reach us, through the office. And and I think that with this increased public participation, they feel like they're more engaged. So that's a silver lining with COVID.
Yeah, it is. It's true on the Zoom meetings. Otherwise, I wouldn't have all of you here with me.
I know.
That's great. Thank you so much for
you.
coming. And Jeremy, I know that we're butting up against council meetings and other activities you have. So I remember you from the first day you came to class and looked around you and said, I wonder what I'm doing here. So it's just so gratifying to see you long gone from the program and succeeding so well. But you're in the middle of your very first campaign with a week to go. Tell us how that's going. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, it's been going good. As Dr. Dora said, I was definitely a big shock in terms of jumping into a program like USC's MPA online program. Prior to that, I'd received my bachelor's from Stan State in sociology, focused on political sociology more than anything, a little bit of political economy in there as well. And then I had a brief stint in a PhD program here at UC Merced before I realized that I would never see my daughter for 6 years, and I'm a father first, and that is one heck of a dedicated program for anybody to be a part of. So I tip my hat to anybody with a PhD acronym following their name, because that is a real sense of sacrifice you put in your life. So I had to step away from that, have a come to Jesus moment, if you will, and then realize that, I need to look at a master's level. And USC is something that, for me, it was kind of a dream, if you will, not even necessarily something, and maybe I'm shorting myself, that I didn't think I'd be able to ever get into. And when I was able to get into USC, it was probably one of the greatest moments of my life in terms of how proud I was of myself. Sounds funny, but I was very excited. First generation student out of 5 other siblings, so it was kind of a big deal for me. And I can't say enough times how much USC curriculum that I went through, the rigor, that encompassed the program, how much it comes into my life daily, in terms of the work that I do. Prior to jumping into politics in terms of campaigning, I served as an HR director in the private sector when I first got into this program. And as a result of a nonprofit management course with Dr. Rawlings, we had a foundation analysis assignment. And I had the opportunity to meet the CEO of the local United Way here in Merced County. About a year later after that, serving on their board, becoming their board president, I was posited with the opportunity to become their CEO. Performed in that role for 4 years. And during that time was probably the most enlightening moments were working directly with the community. When I say the community, I guess I should say the CBOs themselves. Seeing the nature in which the CBOs operated in terms of their capacity, their administrative capacity, their fiscal capacity, their programmatic capacity in terms of being able to measure their programs or even put together a program inherently was something of interest that I started to take, light to in terms of I felt that we were throwing darts, quite a bit while I was at United Way. You see a social issue and you throw a dart at it in the community. And sometimes you're forced to do that as a nonprofit. You can't always connect the causation to the program that you put out there, right? So you try and see how heavily correlated it is to everything you're trying to achieve. And that's difficult. That's a difficult argument and a difficult stance to take when you're doing fundraising. And that's where I started to see that, okay, nonprofits are having issues with capacity. And being able to tell their story in a way that the funding entities would find appealing, if you will. And something that was interesting in our particular climate was a changing philanthropic climate. We had a lot of competition in terms of fundraising. You had the new UC here, UC Merced. You had some educational foundations pop up through the county office of ed, the city, schools, et cetera. So competition was there. And I bring all this up because Heart and Head has always been in the community the minute I took a first step in it, and I haven't been able to get out of it. I've been thinking for quite some time to run office while I've been in there, because what I came across was I felt like we were running a hamster wheel. That was kind of something I'd always say to somebody, hey, how's it going? And I'm just still running the hamster wheel. We're trying to get some stuff done in the community, but that's what it felt like sometimes. And again, my hat goes off to any nonprofit individuals out there putting in that community work, because it's hard and it's tough. And but what I noticed is I wanted to see bigger change. I wanted the outcomes, not necessarily the short-term outputs, not the 1-2 year programs, but I wanted to see something that was linear in terms of how we measured it and what we looked at for KPIs. And I figured the way to get into that would be into broader level impact, which is policy work. And there's no better way to get into that than within your own local government. So, I tinkered around with the idea for quite some time, going back and forth with some of our city elected officials, some of our directors and such. And I had aspirations to become a city manager for quite some time. I met with our city manager periodically, but he always advised me, and so does ICMA, that you don't necessarily want to run for office and then try and hold a high-level administrator position such as a city manager. It's kind of frowned upon, if you will. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. D. So I had to kind of revisit that idea, and over some long discussions, more importantly with my daughter, I'm a father first, was whether or not she'd allow me to run for office, because I was one of the personal reasons I had left the nonprofit sector, because I was just, I'd get home and you couldn't turn it off, and I wanted to make sure I was aware and there with my daughter at all times. So after about 3 or 4 discussions, a lot of V-Bucks on Fortnite, and a few other ways that I bribed her, she allowed me to run for office. And here we are today. It's been a heck of an adventure. I've locked in some great endorsements. Things are going well. And talking in terms of how the MPA has equipped me, like I said, every day, whether it's the public policy, coursework that we had. I was really fond of urban planning. Dr. Leach taught me some really great things in that course that I had very little knowledge of. And I think it's come in handy here in Merced quite a bit as I'm campaigning, especially around economic development and housing. Housing is a big issue for us locally with the UC here. A lot of the housing was chewed up pretty quickly over the last 8 to 10 years because of the UC Merced faculty and students, acquiring those properties. So it's made a bit of a pinch here, and you add that and exacerbates the homelessness issues and so on. And the reason I get to that is USC encapsulated every bit of that in terms of looking at those issues, in terms of bringing in, potential strategies and solutions. One of the greatest things I think I learned through USC was systems thinking. I love systems thinking. I love removing subjectivity from an issue and looking at it objectively. Dr. Doris told me a few times when I've asked her for her advice and her insight, she'd always say, put your heart back in your chest, remove the heart from the equation. Let's think logically, if you will. And I think systems thinking does a lot of that. And we experienced that a couple times through coursework at USC. And I really apply that a lot and looking at a lot of different issues from both nonprofits and on the public side. And then, when you talk about, I know, Dr. D, you asked some people how they communicate and such. There's one thing that makes me cringe locally is I think we lack that communication. Local government has been very closed off, if you will, in terms of trying to find information. You really got to dig through the website to find, what you're looking for. And I think that discourages a lot of our residents, and if you look at the SES and you look at language barriers across Merced, it's an issue. And it's something that I'm looking to address when I get to council and the Smart Cities approach, utilizing our app beyond identifying potholes and road work and looking at other ways and forms of communication through the Smart app. And that's something I'm going to push heavily. And, lastly, the one big thing I want to bring to council, and something that, again, through USC and my experience in the community, was bringing that nonprofit lens. And I speak, just for Merced, but I think our local government really lacks the understanding of what nonprofits go through, how they operate. I think they think we just raise money and give money out, and that's kind of how it goes. But really, it's just much more than that. It takes a high level of business acumen, understanding of finance, revenue streams, et cetera, and looking at, your breaking points in terms of when you're financial forecasting. So it's all of this, that I mentioned, these buzzwords, these terminology that I keep dropping, it's all through USC. This is all stuff that it was foreign to me, and by the time I left, I felt more than equipped to get involved in my community. And, when you talk about how you get involved, the work investment director, my first year on the job at United Way, gave me a really great advice: is get to the table of others. Don't wait for other people to get to your table, and that really resonated with me. And that was something I made sure that I did within the first year at United Way, being a city planning commissioner for 2 years, a chamber board member. I chaired the California Accountable Community Health Initiative, which was a big initiative with the California Endowment, Blue Cross and Kaiser, and among others, trying to create a health information exchange and whole person care. And, all of this came about, again, through making sure that I stepped into the realm of others in terms of the work that they're doing and making myself available. Because you don't know what's going on unless you're out there. You don't know what you don't know. It's another great phrase I always love, to reiterate in my head. So I always make it a point to make sure that you reach out. And, you can't be apathetic. You can't expect to be an armchair theorist and make change in your community, So that's really what's made me want to run for office.
Wow, I'm exhausted just listening to the four of you. Also very impressive, very, very impressive. Jeremy, one question for you. What advice would you give to somebody about how to get involved if they're thinking long-term about running for office? Emily, that slide with everybody's Twitter and Facebook. Yeah, that's great. What one piece of advice would you give somebody in terms of starting a pathway to thinking about running for office?
Yeah, incrementalism, small steps, right? Garner larger wins. And that's the way I kind of look at it. So I honestly started with the school site council. That was my first step. That was kind of an easy, not to sound like an easy win, but it really was. I mean, not too many, teachers, not too many parents were raising their hand at that one, but I wanted to get in there and understand the local control formula, look at the LCAP process and so on. From there, I joined the district advisory committee to represent the school in which my daughter attended for the district level, and you just start kind of, moving your way up slowly. And it was the same way as with United Way. I started off as a community investment committee member, joined the board, became board president, and so on. Not saying that progression is always going to be ideal for everyone, but I'm a firm believer in incrementalism. I love Charles Lindblom, that's economy, but I apply it to a lot of other things. And I think that taking those small steps are big steps, in theory. So I would say start there, look for something that's within reach, and reasonable for you, because the last thing you want to do is get to the table and not be involved, because then you probably won't do much thereafter. So I always think of taking the scale you're trying to reach, I think is most important in starting. But, it really depends contextually on where you are and how you're able to get a hold of people. I'll use a quick little comparison and then I'll be quiet. I had a staff member here that worked for me at United Way, and I'll never forget, one of the most heavily engaged individuals I've ever seen in this community, doing really great things. Moved to Sacramento after he got married. Try to do the same stuff out there. Didn't happen. You know, he couldn't reach his council members the way he could reach them here. He couldn't reach his city manager through text or a phone call, right? He couldn't, it wasn't that easy. You know, he'd reach 3 or 4 people before he would be able to reach he or she in office that he's looking to speak to, right? And the one thing that I always tell people as I've been campaigning and just when I was in the nonprofit sector as a whole in the community is, you guys have the opportunity to access your elected officials that other individuals don't in their community. Like you really do. In Merced, I still say it's a cocktail napkin agreement and a handshake place in a lot of different ways, you know, so you still have that reach, you know, and to exercise that, you know, if you want a pluralistic democracy and you want to be involved locally, then it's going to take, you know, you getting rid of that apathy and being engaged. And again, that depends on the individual.
Great advice, Jeremy. I can see that your fellow alumni all agree with you. I really appreciate you all tonight taking the time out of your busy schedules and all of the campaign work. I know there's a week left to go, so thank you for your time. We all appreciate it, and I'll look forward to hearing about your successes in the future. Thanks so much for being here. Good night. Fight on.